Welcome to the Empathic Mastery Show. I'm your host, Jennifer Moore, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a place where we talk about what it means to be highly sensitive and empathic, how this impacts all aspects of our lives, and we explore tools, resources, and solutions so we can shift from absorbing all the thoughts, feelings, and energy of the world around us to being beacons for calm, love, and healing. Welcome back to the Empathic Mastery Show. I am so excited to be introducing my guest today, Constantin Morun. He is a passionate advocate of personal growth, self-discovery, and professional development with over 15 years of experience. Through his journey from a fear-ridden man hiding his authentic self to embracing vulnerability and authenticity, Constantin demonstrates that self-discovery can unlock the keys to personal and professional success. As a holistic life empowerment mentor and coach, he inspires and empowers individuals on their unique journeys towards growth and self-discovery through both his professional and personal life, as well as his podcast, Unleash Thyself, which is where we got to meet. Integrating his passion for technology, spirituality, and mentorship, Constantin helps individuals unlock their full potential, fostering a positive impact on the world around them. His mission centers on personal growth, spirituality, and self-discovery, dedicated to uplifting and empowering every member of the audience with his humble and sincere insights. And it's his humble and sincere insights that is why I brought him here today. Constantin, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and your audience. Thank you for having me on.
My delight. And obviously, from the sound of your accent, people might know that you are not necessarily a native-born North American. I always love to start at the beginning and start with what was it like for you as a younger person? And I'm sort of imagining if you were a fear-ridden man hiding your authentic self, that even if you were a sensitive person, that may not have been at the forefront. Did you know you were sensitive as a kid? What was it like being a kid? Tell us everything.
Love the question, Jennifer. You're absolutely right. I was born in Eastern Europe, Romania specifically, right? During a time when the country was still under a communist regime, which meant that it was a time of scarcity, a time of fear, rather had to confine to some specific rules and ways of being. So why was I a fear-ridden man most of my life and someone that hid my authentic self? Because I wasn't allowed to be who I am at the core, at the heart level when I grew up, right?
Yes.
Boys don't cry, boys don't draw or do anything creative. They gotta go into the sciences or anything that's more tangible, right? Something that has a future, quote unquote. So those are things that I grew up with, right? And things such as following very strict rules, being punished for making mistakes or for going against the status quo. So that, of course, leaves a fairly big imprint on someone's life. And I didn't actually realize for most of my life, to be honest with you, because I didn't necessarily have a difficult childhood. I was one of the more fortunate where my parents and caretakers, my grandparents, were shielding me from the scarcity, the fear, and everything else that was going on around. However, you can only shield so much when the entire society is a certain way. My grandparents grew up in the early 1900s, my parents as well in the 1950s and 60s. So there were certain traumas they had to endure, certain lessons they had to learn, and they were just passing them down, not because they had an ill intent, but that's because how they grew up and that's all they knew. So that's why I would answer your question is yes. I mean, I kind of knew I was a sensitive person, a sensitive boy. I mean, very, very emotional, but I wasn't allowed to express or really do anything with that beyond just keep it in and beat myself up over it.
And you just said something really important, beating yourself up over it, because we all know, I don't know if you've ever tried using contact paper, which is that adhesive paper that you put on top of like on surfaces and everything. Yeah. And it never fails. You get an air bubble in them. It's like, I think emotions are kind of like those air bubbles. You can push it around all you want, but it's not necessarily going to go away. I really imagine with all of the pressure to be practical, logical, concrete, suck it up, buttercup, don't cry. And also just being in a time where you're dealing with a communist regime, I'm
Mhm.
imagining that you probably, the inner critic must have been pretty harsh.
Oh, absolutely. And it's
Yeah,
been most of my life until I actually became aware of it and decided to do something about it. The inner critic, I want to say, comes from that idea of a fixed mindset where mistakes are to be punished or hidden away, where you hear other people tell you, you're stupid, you're A, B, and C because you've made a mistake. And for
right.
me, I mean, that was normal, right? Like between family members, between friends, it's just call it out as it is. And I didn't realize how detrimental that is to someone's well being and how they perceive themselves and what they end up being when they grow up and they go into society, right? And then, of
Yeah.
course, I mentioned with my parents and my grandparents, what we know is what we teach others and what we do in our own lives. And I was doing the same thing with people in my life, right? With friends, with loved ones. Didn't realize how, again, how impactful in a negative way that has been in my younger years.
Well, and you're talking about something that I've noticed is such a huge thing for personal growth is the relationship between mistakes and failure and how we interpret it. Because if we are trying to avoid failure and trying to avoid making any mistakes, we will not learn anything because we won't take risks and we won't want to look bad or wrong. And I've noticed a lot of times people will not stretch if the rule is that you cannot make any mistakes or you're going to get punished for it. Because, I mean, think about what is it, Einstein and like 100 iterations of the light bulb before he got one that worked. Imagine if he had somebody who was constantly berating him for like making the wrong light bulb. We
Mhm.
wouldn't necessarily have light bulbs, or at least from him. And I personally, I had a really big sort of mindset shift when I started thinking about, instead of thinking about things as mistakes or failure, thinking about it as feedback and realizing like, I'm just getting data, I'm just getting information. And if it's not working the way it is, then this is an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to course correct.
Absolutely. And I'm like you as well. Like a big lesson for me when shifting to growth mindset was the idea that everything we do in life can be seen as an opportunity to learn. Right. And then when I shifted my mindset to that, then it means that everything I do, regardless of what label I apply to it, good, bad, ugly, beautiful, anything in between, you get to at least, at the very least, learn from it. So if you now navigate life with a scenario in which you're like, wow, at the very least, I actually learned something. That's the worst case scenario, then why would you shy away from doing anything in life? This case scenario is a lesson. Now, of course, it's easier said than done, right? You got to shift your mindset, you got to shift your psychology, so how you think about yourself, how you think about the people around you and the world at large. However, it is very much doable.
Well, and there's also a really big difference. I think, geography makes a difference. Be it where you are in the planet, I think definitely makes a difference. And obviously, being in Romania, your experience was very different than it is now in Canada. I'm really curious about that experience, that transition. Did you make the decision to come to North America as an adult? Did you do that on your own? Did your entire family? How did that happen?
It wasn't my decision. We'll put it that way. It was very
Okay.
simple. For me, it wasn't my decision. I was 17 at the time. My brother was 12. Our parents wanted to give us a chance at a better future. We moved as a family of four to Canada back in 2000. And the goal again was to have a better future because Romania, while was no longer a communist country, was still struggling significantly. So you couldn't really get ahead unless you played the game, and the game is corruption, which is something that a lot of people don't want to be part of, my parents included. To give us a chance at a better future, one less corrupt, we moved to Canada. Of course, both my brother and I got a chance to study here. We got our university degrees. We both have beautiful, successful careers. So, for all intents and purposes, what they wanted to achieve happened. And of course, my parents also have amazing careers where they are, and it worked out for all of us in that sense. And while you mentioned that, of course, where you grow up and where you are has a big influence on, of course, your mindset and your life. And I agree with that 100%. However, what I've realized in Canada as well, and now working with people in North America, Asia, Africa, everywhere, A fixed mindset or those type of ideas were not just in Romania or Eastern Europe. You actually
Yes.
see them in many, many cultures, including Western cultures as well. Now, of course, not as often, perhaps, not in the same way, but you still show it up because I came here at 17. I made friends from all cultures and places in the world, and I've seen similar struggles in pretty much every culture.
100%. I mean, it's like no matter where you go, there's an old saying that I really love that I mean, the short version is no matter where you go, there you are. But the longer version is you can take a donkey and you can put it in a crate and you can ship it across the country. But when you open that crate, it's still going to be a donkey. The thing is, the stuff we have to work on, it doesn't matter where we are, it's still going to be the stuff we have to work on.
And that's why, like, for me, psychology becomes so important. And the psychology is, again, the thoughts we have at the conscious level, but also subconscious level about ourselves. So beating yourself up is an example of that, right? The thoughts we have about others, so other people in our life, and then of course thoughts we have about the world at large, because all of that is our foundation and impacts everything else. Because if you have negative thoughts about yourself, it doesn't matter how great your mindset is, it's going to fail because you're going to self-sabotage yourself, you're going to procrastinate, you're going to hesitate, you're going to be filled with self-doubt, right? If I
Yeah.
have negative thoughts about my colleagues, people in my life, it doesn't matter again how much I want to get ahead, it's likely going to hold me back because I'm bringing negativity to whatever environment I go in. And
Yes.
that's not conducive to a successful life. And same about the world around. If I fill my life with watching negative news, right, and being on social media all the time and filling my brain with all that information, how is that going to lead to the life I want?
Well, and I'm seeing so much, like just looking at some of the posts that just happen across, like a friend will post something. Right now, there is so much polarization in the posting and so much fear mongering going on. It's really easy to find your mind going down a rabbit hole and going into the wrong places if we're not really mindful of what we're exposing ourselves to and how we are experiencing it. Because, like you said, there's lots of toxic dump sites and lots of places where we can be breathing the fumes right now.
However, my passion all my life has been people, has been psychology. And
Hmm.
once I started looking into it, right, and as someone that's considered himself fairly empathic and sensitive and emotional, it's been very important for me to understand from a psychological point of view what's actually going on. You mentioned thoughts, and I mentioned thoughts as well. That's where everything starts, meaning that your thoughts will actually lead you to your feelings, right? So if you have negative thoughts, likely you're going to have negative feelings, whatever you designate as negative. And then what do negative feelings do? If you have a feeling of fear towards something, it's going to lead to an action. Maybe you stop engaging with that group, right? If it's polarization, maybe you stop doing something or you do something that you shouldn't be doing as a reaction to the fear. And then
Yes.
everything that comes out of the actions is what we have in our life. So then that means you can reverse engineer this and say, okay, if I want a happy life, let's just say happy or like fulfilled or joyful, you fill in whatever type of life you want. That's the result. So how do you go back? So you go back and say, okay, so to get that, I need to have positive actions. But how do I get positive actions? I need to have positive feelings. But positive feelings don't just happen by themselves. I need positive thoughts. But yet I'm surrounding myself with negative people, with the polarization in the social media, the negative news, the meaningless posts on social media and TikTok and Instagram. How is that going to lead me to those positive thoughts and the actions and the having that I want? So that's how I help people in like understanding that, hey, you know what? It all starts with your thoughts. And of
Right.
course, your thoughts are influenced by your environment. So
Right.
that's where you have a choice. It's not, once you get to the feelings, it's too late.
I'm just like mic drop right there. Once you get to the feelings, it's too late. Because I think so often we kind of start and stop with the feelings, especially as empaths. Like we will spend so much time in the emotional state. I love that you just said it's like once you get to the feelings, it's too late. It's like the horse is already out of the barn. We have to be mindful of and aware of the way that I think of it as not just the thoughts, but the narrative, the stories we're telling ourselves, the conclusions that we're forming about things. But I'm also, one of the things I'm taking from what I'm hearing you say is we do need to be mindful of the environments we place ourselves in, the content that we engage with, the inspiration for our thoughts. That if we want to have positive thoughts, then maybe spending all of our time watching polarizing news channels and like going down rabbit holes of flame wars on social media is not where we're going to get. That's not where it's going to happen.
You're also right when you said it's not just thoughts, it's everything that comes with it, but it does start with a thought, right? If I come, we're having this conversation right now, as you're saying things, thoughts form in my mind around everything that you said. And then from there, depending on which direction I take it in, I make a choice that result in some form of feeling. Because if you say something that offends me, for example, a thought gets formed, and then I have a choice on how to actually go with the thought or which direction to take it in. That all happens fairly quick, right? And then from there, you get the feelings and everything else that comes with it. And I
Yeah.
did say, once you get the feeling, it's too late. In reality, it's never too late to actually fix something. It becomes
Right.
much, much harder, though.
There's a line that I love, which is an ounce of pre-frame is worth a ton of reframe. And I think that that's the thing. If we can catch it and start in the thought place, the pre-frame, then we do not end up in that period of putting out the fires, the emotional fires that happens after the fact. Yeah, it's fixable, but it's about leverage. It's a lot easier to leverage the shift at the thought level than it is necessarily to leverage the shift at the
Yeah, because
emotional
if you look
level.
at the four levels, we talked about thoughts, feelings, actions, and the results. People, and that's me included in the past, we want to change behaviors, right? Or let's call them, change our habits. What are habits? They're a set of actions that we do on a daily basis. Of course, they're backed by feelings and thoughts,
Yes.
right? But if I'm trying to put better habits on top of a lot of negative feelings, which a lot of us unfortunately have through depression, anxiety, burnout, stress, procrastination, you name it, then what's going to happen? How likely are those good habits? How likely is it the good habits are going to stick around when your foundation is weak? For me, they never stuck around just because of that. Sometimes I might have gotten lucky and they stuck around for like 3 months, 6 months, but then you end up with self sabotage. You end up with bringing yourself down because those negative thoughts haven't been dealt with. So then you're filled with negative emotions, which unfortunately will dictate the actions you take or not take.
I'm not sure if I'm doing the math right, but you guys, I mean, did you sort of like, so you came to North America around the year 2000? Is
Yeah,
that, yeah.
exactly. When I
Yeah.
was
So you came to North America around the year 2000. And I'm thinking, if I'm doing the math right, there was an 8-year period before the spiritual awakening, like life, the big pivot, because you were saying you've been on this spiritual path for 15, or this path of personal development and growth and everything for 15 years. So doing the math, I'm figuring that means that 8 years, you spent 8 years in the US, or not in the US, sorry, in Canada, but you spent 8 years here in North America as a young man. I'm imagining, for one thing, like experiencing a bit of culture shock and kind of decompressing from being Eastern Europe to coming to Canada. But I'd love to hear, like, what was the experience of that 8-year period like for you? And what was it that actually was the wake up call for you, or the thing that made you go, this is not working for me anymore. I need to do it differently?
Yeah, I love the question there, Jennifer. So a couple of things. So when I came here, I was placed in grade 11. At the time, there were 13 grades in Canada. So I did a couple of years of, actually almost end of grade 11. So I did a couple of years in high school, and then I moved on to university. So those 8 years that you're mentioning are mostly when I did my studies. Now, I was fortunate enough that I was in a very high level of math and sciences back in Romania in the high school I did, right? So I finished grade 10 in Romania, but that helped me get through most of my university as well. That's how high the level was where I came from. So it's very helpful in that regard. Now, the culture shock was huge, right? The fact I lost all my friends and had to, remake friends and all that stuff. Not knowing the language is another big block that we had, right? So it took a bit of time to go through that. And I didn't realize my fixed mindset for a while. I didn't realize all of the things that were happening in my life. And even though, let's say, I had a fixed mindset, I was going through these struggles, I was still trying to find myself as a person, but I didn't have the right mentors, the right people in my corner, the right friends, even at the time, right? So I was kind of keeping myself small.
Hmm.
And around mid 20s is when I had, the first interaction, or I should the first spiritual awakening, rather. You see, I grew up as a religious person to some degree because I was born a Christian Orthodox. We would go to church every so often. I never really believed in it, but I was part of the system, so to speak. But then as I moved out from my parents' home when I was about 19, I stopped going to church. I didn't do any of the stuff. And I was agnostic for a period of time. Or at least that's what I thought I was. But around, when I was like mid 20s is when I had my first interaction with someone that claimed to be an alternative healer. And she needed my date of birth and my name to draw up a chart and start telling me about myself. And this was all part of a bigger, let's call it, practice where we went there to help my brother and my ex-wife in dealing with some depression, anxiety, stress that couldn't be dealt with POs or therapists. I mean, they tried those things, they weren't working. As part of this help that we're trying to give them, we all had to do some sessions. And we did this chart and we got this information. I was one of the first people to go in and have a private conversation with the lady. She was telling me things about myself from just a chart that I couldn't believe that someone could actually know with just so little information. For a while I thought it was my mom that told her way ahead of time, or my ex, or someone else had told her, even though I was one of the first people, if not the first, to talk to her. And the skeptic in me was coming out because I didn't have any other answers. And keep in mind, I have a math background, which
Yeah,
means
you were raised in science. Of course, you're going to be looking at it from a scientific standpoint.
that was kind of the opening for me to do more research, to kind of think about it more. And I didn't do much at the beginning. I mean, I was on a personal transformation journey at the time, and I was learning a lot about myself, but more specifically in the context of a professional life, right? So my persona at work versus my persona in my personal life were very, very different for a very long time. I wasn't showing my true colors, meaning, my true self, be out of fear of rejection, out of fear of, people not liking me, any of those fears that most of us have struggled with at some points in life. And my true spiritual awakening didn't come until when I was about 36, 37, so a few years ago now. And then it really got elevated in 2022, so about a year and a half ago now, more than that, almost 2 years, when I went to Ecuador and had a plant medicine journey as part of a mental health retreat I did. And I then sat with Mother Ayahuasca. And at that point, up to that point, I had done no type of mind altering medication, including alcohol. Like I drank some alcohol, but I was never drunk to the point where I would alter my state of mind. Same with drugs. I've never participated in anything, but yet I was drawn into this plant medicine retreat. And I said, you know what? I have an open mind, even though I don't necessarily believe in it. I have an open mind. And then the rest is history, as they say, because that's
Yeah.
brought me to where I am today.
Plant medicine is pretty remarkable stuff when it comes to transforming us. I, on the other hand, had quite a bit of experience with all kinds of things when I was much, much younger. And I would say I really believe that cannabis was one of the first mind openers for me. I stopped a long time ago because it did what it needed to do. And then it was sort of like, okay, you don't need to come back here anymore. There is something to be said for those moments or those experiences where we perceive the universe in a completely different way. I'm struck by the fact that I find this to be true for so many of us that if you start looking at the timeline and you start looking at the story, there are all of these points along the way where little breadcrumbs are dropped, where a window is opened, where we come to a wall and we take a left or a right turn. And that it's not like we just get picked up from being a 17-year-old in Romania to suddenly here you are, this podcaster, mentor, spiritual seeker. There's just this journey. It took the time that it took.
Yeah, the way I look at it right now, and I love how you put it as well, is I see the journey, let's call it life is a journey, right? From start to finish. But then within life, we have multiple voyages, right? Which are shorter journeys that you embark on a voyage, do some learning, you get to the end, hopefully celebrate, take your learnings, and get on to the next one. And that's how my life has felt because, like you said, in the different timelines, I did this spiritual awakening when I was 25 ish to like 27, let's say, and then it kind of went in the closet for a bit. And then again, it came up when I was mid 30s. And then it really escalated when I was 39 or 38 first, and then, throughout my 39th year. And now, as I'm 40 and I go to this, it's just building and building on itself, right? Because it's building on all the lessons I've learned. And
Yes.
because now I have the power of hindsight, meaning I can go back and I can open those gift boxes with lessons I've left unopened in the past. Now I can build at a much faster rate because it's not just I'm learning in the moment from someone like yourself or other people. I'm also learning from everything I've left unopened in the past.
And we also have this ability to have a new perspective and a new understanding of things that we might have looked at it a million times. And then all of a sudden, it's like you just gaze at it in a slightly different light and something clicks that was not necessarily able to click before. And I also think that there's something about getting into your 40s, your 50s, even, 60s, 70s, 80s. But as we like, crossing over that Rubicon into the 40s, one thing I've seen for so many of us is that we start to care more for our authentic self and less about what other people will think. And I've seen that it's like there's a certain point where that pressure to comply, to conform, to be liked by everybody, it just doesn't have quite the same teeth that I think it has when we are younger. And so I've definitely seen like there's almost like there's more permission within ourselves to say yes to ourselves, I think, as we get into our fourth, fifth, sixth, and decades and beyond.
Yeah, it's an interesting take, Jennifer.
Yeah.
I got me thinking there for a second on, and I would agree with you. I would also add that the people that you have in your corner, right, the mentors, the coaches, the people you learn from also have a big say in this.
Yes.
Because I'm seeing younger and younger people be fed up with how the system is. And when I say system, it's anything from social media to society to governments, right? It doesn't matter what system you're in. We all belong to some systems. And then they seek out the people to follow, so the mentors, be able to have these awakenings, to have these changes in their life much earlier than you and I perhaps did. And that's actually
Yes.
a lot of hope in me for the future because you don't have to wait till you're 40 to have these awakening moments and put yourself on a path that aligns with your heart. You can do it much, much sooner. And that's one of the big reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing today is because with all the experience that someone like yourself and myself have right now, we can help others shorten the timeline.
Well, and Dolores Cannon, who's a hypnotherapist who now on the other side, but who's a healer who I have incredible, immense respect for, she has talked about the waves of volunteers that have come in. And then my guides have also talked about the planet is substantially less dense now than it was. It was when I was born. I mean, I was born in the early 60s and nobody was talking about this stuff. Even in sort of the 20 years between my birth and your birth, there's definitely a difference, I think, in terms of just like the openness of possibilities for you as opposed to for me. And it does seem like also there's a lot. One of the things Dolores talks about is just that there's a lot more people who are being born right now who are not coming in with the level of karmic burden. Many of us baby boomers and even and like the Gen Xers often came in with a lot of karma to clear. And this newer generation, a lot of them are coming from other dimensions, they're coming from other planetary systems. They're volunteering to be here at a time where we just need all hands on deck, but they don't have the level of emotional congestion or density that some of us who are older have. This theory that Dolores talks about and then my guides have talked about just rings true to me, that it seems like and fits with what you're talking about too, where these kids are not having to go through the same level of, they're not having to slog through all of it that many of us had to when we were younger.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would agree with
Yeah.
that too. And there's another element there, of course, and this is all how it all lines up. You and I when we grew up, we didn't have the luxury of the internet.
True dat. Yeah.
And you couldn't,
Yeah.
I mean, the people you, for example, could connect with, and even me growing up in Romania, were literally people within your immediate network. Of course, you don't have as many opportunities because a lot of people younger ones that I see awakening right now, and I'm helping through that process myself, don't necessarily have that immediate network in their immediate life. It's mostly virtual, right? Which then goes to say, yes, you know what, the internet is actually a critical aspect of all that's happening right now because it allows people to bridge that gap of just knowing a handful of people or even 100 people within their immediate range. So I feel that's going to make a much, much bigger impact. And of course, artificial intelligence actually playing a big role in this as well, because like anything else, it's energy, which means that if you are aligning your energies properly, meaning you're elevating yourself, you can tap into this artificial intelligence to just exponentially grow.
I would actually, you wanted to open that can of worms because there are so many people right now who are so afraid of AI. There's so much fear mongering that is going on about artificial intelligence. I would love to hear. And yet I love what you're saying. And I would be inclined to agree with you. It's a tool that you can use effectively or ineffectively, but it is a tool. And I also, when I think about the internet, almost everything in my life is directly connected to or as a result of the internet. It's like we live in a house that we found on the internet. I actually found my husband on the internet like a long time ago. So many aspects of my life are as a result of the internet. And I can't even imagine what my life would be like. I wouldn't know about EFT. I wouldn't certainly, I mean, we wouldn't be, probably none of us would be podcasting. I wouldn't be having a conversation with you. Just so much is different because of the internet, and it's such a remarkable blessing when used correctly in a similar way that I think believe AI can be used. But please, like, say more about AI.
So just to preface, I do work in AI. That's my day job in the corporate world. So I'm exposed to this on a daily basis. But even for my podcast, I've used the AI since day one, and without AI, I wouldn't be able to do what I do today because it allows me to shorten, well, not necessarily just shorten, but essentially complete tasks that I wouldn't have physical time for, show notes, even ideation or other things that have come up. And AI, yes, it's very scary for many people, but every technology ends up being scary at the beginning, like the invention of the internet, right? And everything else that has come since then. Personally, you hinted towards this, it's how you use it and how you.
Yeah.
AI is just as you want to make it to be, meaning that if I had a personal assistant, right, it wouldn't just make me an amazing person all of a sudden and I would free up all this time because it still depends on me giving the assistant the right instructions and the right access and the right data to work with to help me. That's how artificial intelligence is as well, for me at least. It's an assistant that then can come help you focus on what's important to you, which means that you can give it tasks that are just sucking up time from your day. You pass it on to this assistant, and then you can focus on more of the things you like to do. So in my case, what is that? Coaching, mentoring, podcasting, focusing on my corporate job, not just spending hours upon hours to draft up show notes, edit videos, or anything like that, that, for example, an AI can do, or a virtual assistant, right? And that's where you see a lot of people finding value, but personally, I also find value in ideation, in having essentially this, let's call it intelligent or at least educated companion that you can bounce ideas off of. Meaning that I might have an idea for an episode I want to record, and then I just go to AI and say, hey, these are my ideas, this is my background. What are your thoughts? And you can have it act as a critic in whatever area you're in, specialized in. And it can give you enough information that you can be like, you know what? I haven't thought about that. To ideate with. Now, can it take jobs? Right now, it's taken some because it can do graphics, right? Is it going to take more jobs in the future? Absolutely. However, I also believe it's going to create a lot of opportunities for those people that are not afraid to be at the forefront and learn about this technology and use it for their own benefit, but also ideally for the benefit of those around them.
Well, and I've been an early adopter with technology ever since I was pretty young. And so I've been playing with and experimenting with how do we leverage AI in a way that allows us to do things. And my experience, especially right now with a lot of the visual art and the graphics in AI, is that you can still tell that it's AI. The hands are always wonky, the eyes are almost always wonky. Like there's aspects to it that are just kind of like not 100% perfect. But what I love to do is take a piece of it or take some aspect and then blend it into and utilize it and rework it in a way that allows me to create something fresh
Mhm.
and not necessarily just from the AI, even with like show notes. Preach, like having anything to make doing show notes easier is always a good thing. Anybody
Yeah.
who's a podcaster understands what we're talking about. But even with like using one of the copywriting like Chat GPT or something like that, even with that, it's like you got to go back in and edit it. You got to go back in and comb through it and make it your own. And I think that's where the relationship is in taking the content. I imagine that it's more about saving us time than it is necessarily about completely replacing us.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And I mean, that's the other point. I mean, it's going to replace some people because, let's say, it might take 7 people to do something that AI can do with 2 people and then the AI. So that's going to happen. It's already happening, right? Call centers are experiencing this, and there's different industries that are being disrupted. But even like in the Zoom way that they were doing the scene, you have something called an AI companion. If I look at how I do my work at Microsoft, and we have Microsoft Teams and we have AI embedded in it, and this is something that happened recently because I was traveling for work. And meetings that are recurring are not stopping, right? They're still going ahead. Just because I'm traveling doesn't mean the meeting stops. In the past, I would either have to rely on a colleague to take notes or reach out to people and say, hey, what did I miss in this meeting? Right now, if I have AI turned on, the meeting is recorded. It literally can summarize the entire meeting and can tell me, hey, you have action items, or I can just go in and ask you questions and say, okay, what have I missed? What action items do I have? And that alone saves so much time because in the past, I would have to either maybe listen to the entire recording, if there was one to begin with, or bother so many people to find out information. So just looking up information in the past was more painful. I mean, you go to Google and you search. I envision a future where you're not even going to search for stuff. You're going to ask, where can I find A, B, and C? The access you have, if it's within work, personal life, or just the web, you're going to get those answers much quicker. How do I fix my washing machine? How do I fix this? Right? It's going to be a much more tailored experience to you as an individual and especially what you're looking for versus,
right.
you type this into Google today, you will get a bunch of websites, you'll get some YouTube videos, and you're going to have to find that, right? So like you said, it's all about saving you time to be more in your zone of genius, meaning in the zone in which you can be the happiest, the most joyful, the most fulfilled, and bring the biggest impact to yourself and the world. And that's the direction we're going towards right now.
Well, and I'm just thinking in some ways it's really interesting how people are all up in arms right now about about AI for particularly graphic design and writing and the idea when we've had Alexa and we've had Siri and we've had all of these other forms of artificial intelligence that we are sort of accustomed to. And as you said, anytime any new technology is introduced, there's a certain resistance to it. I mean, I was alive before personal computers were a thing. I've watched technology go from music being vinyl, like people listen to music on vinyl records, to then we had 8-track tapes, which were thankfully a very short lived thing, which if you've never encountered them, you're lucky you haven't. And then from 8-track tapes, we went to cassette tapes. And then from cassette tapes, we went to CDs. And I remember like everybody was up in arms when
Mhm.
we switched over to CDs because people were like, it's not as warm sounding and it's not like vinyl and it's not analog and it's not this and it's not that. And then we moved from CDs over to all of the music being digital and stored in the cloud, which is kind of the way that music is delivered now. It's like almost all digital and very sometimes people are like old audiophiles and they love the old vinyl, but for the most part, people it's all virtual. And it's been fascinating to witness the change. And I think you're really, it's just a really wonderful reminder that as technology improves, we as humans, we do have a tendency to get a little up in arms before we accept it and transition to it.
Yeah, I mean, let me add one really quick thing here because it's important
Yeah.
to note and you touch on this. I mean, there are many ethical considerations to have in mind.
Yes.
Many companies like Microsoft, OpenAI, they're tackling a lot of those potential challenges. But the reality is, for example, the AI models were trained images and graphics from real artists, trained on blog articles and podcasts and things that real people created, threatening those very jobs. Right. And it's, yes, it's about adopting and adapting to what's going on in the world. But we have to understand that it does have some ethical considerations because of how it's being trained and what it's going to do. So it's going to bring questions such as, okay, do you start creating, let's say, a way for people to have a base income, and then they can choose if they want to work more or they go into a special path to make more money if they want to, or they can have their basic needs covered by being in these programs that countries are going to start to offer because AI is going to take over many jobs. Now, on the flip side of it, if you think about artificial intelligence and what is required for it right now, a lot of computing power is required, meaning that a lot of actual physical raw power and minerals to create the computers and whatnot are required. There's going to be a bottleneck there, not in the very distant future, which means that it's not like just AI is just going to continuously grow to infinitum because we're in a fixed system. So something will have to give. So we have to see, where it lands. I am confident it will be in a good spot, and because like anything else around us, everything is energy level is we're at a good point of frequency and vibration. AI is going to work for you because it's just how
Mhm.
you manipulate energy. And if
Yes.
low frequency, low vibration, then of course nothing is going to work anyway.
There's so much richness in this conversation. You bring up an incredibly interesting point. Hopefully, one of the things that will happen from this is as people start realizing that there's limited resources in terms of just minerals and power to continue to support the grid, maybe we could, hopefully, the idea of like the way that the planned obsolescence within electronic equipment might be like maybe we could try to work with how do we take the equipment we currently have and upgrade it as opposed to people just throwing old computers on the scrap heap every single 3 to 5 years.
Mhm.
Because I mean, it's crazy how much electronics just keep on getting tossed. We're going to have to sort of like have a come to Jesus moment around our technology. You also mentioned about just the amount of power it takes. And my mind was blown as a visual artist. I have a background in visual art. And one of the things when NFTs became really popular, I had a bunch of friends come to me and be like, hey, you should check out the NFTs. And what was really fascinating was that I started reading about the amount of energy it consumes to support a server that hosts NFTs. And it was like, it never even dawned on me because we're so removed from the cloud in some ways. I don't think that we always think about the power that goes into maintaining these grids or these systems of artificial intelligence.
And I mean, some of them, thankfully, are more renewable energies. However, if you think about like solar power, which is the big one, amount of energy that goes into mining the required minerals and actually producing and shipping all those things usually negates a significant amount of benefit you get out of something that's renewable. In fact, and this is something I have to double check the math on myself, but I was reading on batteries that are used in EV vehicles, right? And the battery life right now is about 10 years. 7 years of the battery's life, you have no real gain when it comes to the clean energy because of all the energy that was spent on the back end to create that battery. And then because you have to replace it after 10 years, which essentially just becomes scrap metal in most parts, it's very hard to recycle them, as far as I understand right now. Then even the 3 years you did gain from it are gone to waste because of you having to discard it and get a new one. The technology is in a good spot, but it needs to get a lot better before we see real impacts from that. And there will be bottlenecks because the price of energy, the availability of energy, the demand of energy, all of those are increasing. No,
So
AI should make it easier. But
AI can make it easier. Yes. And so let's go back to, oh my goodness, I just looked at the time. And it is the moment where I look at you and I say, Constantine, I cannot believe how fast the time has gone by. I don't necessarily want to like put a pin in it right at this very moment, just because I'd love to turn back to such a core message that I feel we are talking about today's mindset and about the using, and in some ways, it's like we've ended up workshopping it through the concept of AI. But I'd love to hear just a little bit more about like how do we merge positive mindset and AI to make it work in our favor? I mean, you've spoken about this a bit with like show notes and things like that, but let's hear
there's
a little more.
so many ways, and I love that you want to bridge those two because I feel it's very important. Now, one of the challenges most people face in life is they don't have access to the right mentors, coaches, people in their life, therapists, even right, psychiatrists, any of that. What I have seen with AI, because it's trained on a lot of these same books that a therapist would use, a psychiatrist would use, a coach, a mentor, they can actually literally become a light version of a person to be in your corner. So you could use AI as someone to bounce ideas of and say, hey, I have these thoughts and I have these feelings. What can I do about that? Again, because it's trained in some of the same models as most people are, it's been very accurate from what I have seen. So personally, I might go and say, hey, I'm having this challenge right now. What can I do? And some answers are basic, but some are getting better and better because you can search the internet and you can say, hey, according to this medical website backed by this scientific research, this is what I have found. And if people start ending up using it more like this, and you'll see AI embedded in meditation apps and mental health apps, I feel like that's going to be one of the biggest gains that we can possibly get from it. And that's going to help the mindset. Because I did mention earlier, or rather hinted towards it, your mindset is nothing without a solid foundation of your psychology. You cannot change your thoughts, then the mindset doesn't matter. Right?
Right. Right.
Because we all know what it takes to procrastinate less in a way, right? We all know what it takes to lose weight. And I'm still in the process myself. But it's the foundations that are impacting us, right? Because if my foundation is weak emotionally, which mine was in the past, and still is to some degrees because I'm always learning, then I'm going to self sabotage myself. Imposter syndrome, I'm going to have a fear of failure. And that's going to keep showing up and drag me down every time.
Right.
So that's why I feel like AI can potentially help a bit. It's not a replacement for any therapy, for any type of mentorship or coaching. But for those that don't have access to anything else, it's better than nothing.
If you don't have access to anything, it's better than nothing. I'm wondering, you mentioned, I know, I mean, I've worked with like ChatGPT, and my understanding is that ChatGPT has like had like a cap on the resources where it does not have access to just like randomly going around the internet. I'm imagining not AI, all AI is created equal. At this point in time, is there a platform that you have engaged with that you would recommend that you have found to be particularly robust and more versatile?
So ChatGPT is essentially the best you can find. Now, there are different versions of it, right? So
Yes.
ChatGPT 3 or 3.5, which is available for free. Anyone is the one that's restricted to one restricted, but it's been traded on information up to
I think
2000.
2021.
Exactly. ChatGPT 4, I have the paid version of ChatGPT, and a couple of the new releases have given me access to bots that can crawl the internet. So I can
Mm,
actually ask them, hey, go find me research on this topic, and it will go and do that. Right? You always, absolutely always want to double check everything that AI gives you back because it does have this idea of hallucination where it's like going to make stuff up as it goes without necessarily telling you, right? Especially if you're using a version of ChatGPT that doesn't crawl the internet. It's very poor. Like if you ask ChatGPT 3.5 and even original 4.0 without internet access to give you studies, it will make up studies. You ask it for clarification. And I've caught it pretty early, but you have to be careful. And that means anything you ask it, you can just ask for validation. And you can also, of course, check on Google. So those are
yes.
the limitations of the platforms right now. But
Yeah.
if you can start crawling the internet, which it does right now, then it's a lot easier because you now have direct reference. So when it's giving me a response, it's going to have a reference that says, this is where I pulled it from. You have to go verify it yourself, should you want to.
This is true with anything. And I think like this is the lesson that anybody, any scholarship is like we're taught, and we seem to, as human beings, we have to keep learning it over and over and over again, is check your sources.
Yes.
Look into your sources. And also, like when I used to work with herbs, especially when I was younger and I was first learning about things, one of my personal rules was I would always look for like a minimum of 3 different sources, but ideally 6 different sources for anything I was going to be working with, just to back up that the information I was getting was consistent and not cut and paste of the exact same thing. I like to be sure. So I'm a big fan. If you're going to use something that's going to help cut down on the research, you still have to do your due diligence and check your sources.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything to do with AI, if you're going to use any of the work, always do your due diligence. And another thing I should mention is that most people make a mistake of thinking AI is going to do the work for them. You get the best results when you start from something you've created and you refine it using AI, and of course verify all the information it's giving you back.
Yeah.
Now, AI is going to get better and better because it's getting trained on a regular basis. Something
Right.
like ChatGPT, and most people have to be careful with this, is that ChatGPT, when you use it, essentially when you agree to the terms of service, which you have to in order to use it, the data you give it, it's literally you're training the model for them. So
Yes.
your data is in the public space. Now, of course, it's protected. You checked off the fact that they can use your data for training, right? Within, for example, Microsoft, where I work, and I use Copilot, which is our own version of AI using ChatGPT in some parts and other models in others, they can be confined to the data of the organization or the data of the company it's working with. So you're not actually putting it out in the web. And even if someone wants to do anything with it, they don't have access because it's data, right? So, but you and I, as individuals, don't have that luxury because we don't have the resources to be able to confine this to our own environment. So people have to be very careful what they put out because it could be leaked the same way when you sign up for a website to buy whatever, and then you realize that they leaked your data, right? Your email address, your phone number, whatever, because websites get hacked all the time.
Yeah.
Due diligence is the bottom line here, and you mentioned it as well.
Well, and there's a saying, you're as sick as your secret. Well, and this is not quite the same thing, but sort of you're as sick as your secrets is one way to look at it. But also, you be really mindful of what anything that we speak or say has the potential to be seen in the world. So it's kind of like, don't be, like if you don't want to be like remembered for dancing with a lampshade on your head at the middle of a party, then don't go to a party and put a lampshade on your head and dance at it. And I think that's true when it comes to how do we use AI and what are we using and what are we doing with our data in general? It feels like the universe just was like, well, you're going to talk about AI today. Like, I had no idea we were going to end up going, from talking about mindset and growing up in the Eastern Bloc to this. What an amazing journey. But also, it feels like you are an expert in AI, and this is such a cutting edge conversation. No wonder. I mean, of course, we ended up having this conversation because this is just so like in the moment, right here, right now.
Let me add something that I think
Yeah.
you'll find very interesting, and same with your audience, because we are on a spiritual podcast after all, and we are talking spirituality. So one of the bots I'm playing with right now is a bot that's a tarot card reader. Literally, so it's built on ChatGPT. You give it whatever question you have, and then it's going to draw 3 cards, and it's going to give its interpretation. And I was playing with it, and I had some other friends play with it, and it's scarily accurate. I'm not someone that believes big time in tarot readings. I've had maybe 2 in my life, 2 readings, and this was, just because they were available. And this was at the retreat I went to in Ecuador. So to see the accuracy of this in an AI, I was like, wow, there's something there. And what it got me thinking is, again, back to the idea of energies. AI is just another energy, which means that it can be manipulated in a way, or frequency, if you want to think of it, or vibration, whatever you want to call it, to work for you and with you.
Yes.
Right? So if you're a believer in that, if you're someone that's spiritual and can work with those type of energies, why would you not be able to work with artificial intelligence the same way? That's why it's
Absolutely.
powerful to be in your corner.
I really love what you're saying here, that all of this is energy. And ultimately, it's like, how do we want to work with the energy? Do we want to work with the energy in a positive way? Or do we want to be sort of at the whims and a victim of sort of external circumstance? Are we
Exactly.
going to be the master of our own destiny, or are we going to be yanked around by the winds of fortune? So we really are at this point, absolute mark. And so I want to ask you one question or two
Yeah.
last questions. We're going to do the time travel in a second, but before we do the time travel, just what, if anything, feels really important to share before we end?
There's a few things. There's always a few things with me, but
Yeah.
one that keeps coming to mind because we talked about the psychology, the mindset aspect of it, is this idea no matter who you are, no matter how tough your life may seem right now, you absolutely hold the power to change your circumstances completely. It won't happen overnight, it won't even happen in a week, but it can happen over a short period of time if you address your psychology first and go from there. And of course, spirituality can only help in that because you can meditate, you can have a practice of gratitude, you can do breath work, you can do so many things that can bring you back to who you truly are, which means you can then tackle all those negative thoughts that lead to everything else. So that's what came up first. So I wanted to share that. So
Yeah.
you, everyone listening to this, you have the power to change any circumstance in your life.
And I think that's something that when we are feeling hopeless and despairing and we're looking at all of the manipulation of emotions going on in the world, it can be really easy to forget that. So, and you certainly are an example of somebody who has come from challenges and transformed your life. So you can speak with authority in saying you can change things.
Yeah, I mean, I've
Yeah.
like I've been depressed for a very long period of my life. I didn't realize how long it actually was. I've been burnt out, anxious, stressed out, and it culminated in 2021 and 20 part of 2022. And yet here I am today, and I see no path in which those feelings will return because now I'm equipped with the tools and the knowledge to deal with any of those same challenges coming up. Now,
Mm,
it doesn't mean every day is perfect. It doesn't mean I don't get sad. It doesn't mean I don't get a bit anxious occasionally. But when I do, I'm like, oh, I know what it is. And here
yeah.
are the tools I've used in the past to get myself out of it. So if people are stuck right now, if you listen to this, feel stuck,
Yeah.
it's just a challenge that's waiting to be overcome by you, and you can do it. You find a way to overcome it, and then you're going to be able to not only overcome it again over and over when it shows up, but you'll be able to inspire others to overcome it as well. Give them permission to go on the journey.
Okay, so now we're going to do the time travel exercise,
Let's do
which
it.
so basically, the way that I love to think about this is that a podcast exists in perpetuity. It exists in sort of beyond time on a server somewhere where people will be listening to this many years from now. But I also believe that when we do a broadcast, it's like we're dropping a stone in the river of time and it ripples both ways. And so you and I have the ability to send or to go back to a time where younger Constantine really needed a message. So, my question to you is, and the way I like to do this is that we speak directly to him, not like I would tell him this, but you are loved, you are safe, you are worthy, you have the strength, you have the courage, that kind of, but like directly speaking to him. So, how old is he? When and where are we going back to? And what are you saying to? What are we telling him?
Let's say 3 years old.
So we're going back to 3-year-old Constantine
Yes.
in Romania. Oh,
In
and I have a question. Were you raised in the city or were you raised in the suburbs or the
in
country?
the city,
Yeah.
with my grandparents, because my
Mhm.
parents were working long, long hours.
So in the city in Romania with your grandparents, 3 years old, what are we going to tell that little baby, that little boy?
That he can do whatever he wants. Doesn't have to be limited by those raising him and the society around it, right?
You can do whatever you want. You are not limited by the people raising you. You are not limited by the society around you. What else does he need to hear? You are strong. You've got your
Strong with
imagination is
love,
going to take
right?
you really far. You are loved.
You can do anything you put your mind to and your heart to, right?
Yeah, you can do anything you put your mind and your heart
That's
to.
why we're doing this right now, because one of the things I've done as part of my transformation has been, well, besides meditation and things of that nature and plant medicine, hypnotherapy sessions. And
Yes,
hypnotherapy sessions are all about this. I got
yes,
to go back to my 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2 year old even,
yeah,
and do a lot of this healing.
exactly,
It's
exactly.
such a
There's
powerful
so
lesson.
much power in going back in time and giving them what they need and telling them what they need. You are loved. You are strong. You are wonderful. You are bright. You are creative. You have so much to offer this world, and you will. You're going to get through this time and you're going to do amazing things.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Love that.
Okay. Last question. How do we get in touch with you?
I
How
love
do we
that.
find your podcast?
So yeah, podcast Unleash Thyself, all the major podcasting platforms, or
Yeah.
YouTube. Unleash Thyself. We have a video version, and our episode, Jennifer, will come out in the near future as well.
Awesome.
And as far as myself, of course, there's a website, unleashthyself.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as Constantin Morun, or you can even just send me an email, constantin@unleashthyself.com.
Wonderful. Constantine, thank you so much for being here. This has been such a unexpected, interesting, and delightful conversation. I'm so glad we ended up having this long, big conversation about AI. I never dreamed this was where we were going to go, and it was
To be
perfect.
honest. But hey, if that's where you had to go, that's where you went. And
Yeah, that's where they were like, hey, talk about AI. Nobody else is going to. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
As we come to the end of this episode, I'd love to hear what you're taking from this show. Please jump over to empathicmasteryshow.com to leave your comments. In the show notes, you'll find a link to grab your copy of my Empathic Safety Guide, 3 Basics for Finding Calm in the Eye of the Storm. And while you're there, please subscribe and follow this show. And thank you for your help sharing this show with the people who need it. Please help me to spread the word and send this podcast to friends or family members who need support living as highly sensitive empathic people. Then join me again when the next Empathic Mastery Show airs. Okay, one last time. Hop over to empathicmasteryshow.com for your empathic safety guide. And until next show, shine on. We need you and your gifts here on this planet. So please don't judge your empathic rainbow by colorblind standards.